Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Joy.
It's exactly 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
6 Right? Do you sing Jai Malla or just?
It's up to you, Sasha.
It's up to you.
Yeah.
It's up to you, Prabhu.
However Krishna inspires.
Then maybe I would rather speak and then at the end you can
Yep.
It's on the schedule. Yeah, maybe I can say everyone welcome for our program. We have it every Saturday at 5:30. So we are.
He already introduced us, but you can.
Yeah, but you should do it.
Yeah, okay. So
I'm not
you know
professional.
Tulsi Prabhu. He is a monk traveling for many years and preaching all over the world about the science of Krishna consciousness and self-realization. So thank you for joining us today. And as for the schedule, we have the class till about 7, including questions and answers if anyone has. And Tulsi Prabhu can take them whenever he wants, either during the class or at the end. So it's up to him. And then we'll have another kirtan and then prasadam. So a vegetarian dinner.
Who doesn't know Bhagavad Gita? Oh, young man, you're coming first time?
I have gift for Bhagavad Gita. Gift for you. I gave it to somebody else.
So, dear devotees and friends, we have to read verse 29 from 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. The chapter is called Transcendental Knowledge. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, the verse is as follows. Apane juhvati pranam, prane panam tata pare, prana apana gati rudva, pranayama parayana, apare nyatahara, pranam praneshu juhvati. Translation. Still others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance practice by offering the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Others, curtailing the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. A little bit esoteric verse. Purport. This system of yoga for controlling the breathing process is called pranayama, and in the beginning it is practiced in the hatha yoga system through different sitting postures. All of these processes are recommended for controlling the senses and for advancement in spiritual realization. This practice involves controlling the airs within the body so as to reverse the directions of the air passage. The apana air goes downward and the prana air goes up. The pranayama yogi practices breathing the opposite way until the current are neutralized into puraka, equilibrium. Offering the exhaled breath into the inhaled breath is called rechaka. When both air's currents are completely stopped, one is said to be in kumbhaka yoga. By practice of kumbhaka yoga, one can increase the duration of life for perfection in spiritual realization. The intelligent yogi is interested in attaining perfection in one life without waiting for the next. For by practicing kumbhaka yoga, the yogis increase the duration of life by many years. A Krishna conscious person, however, being always situated in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, automatically becomes the controller of the senses. His senses, being always engaged in the service of Krishna, have no chance of becoming otherwise engaged. So at the end of life, he is naturally transferred to the transcendental plane of Lord Krishna. Consequently, he makes no attempt to increase his longevity. He is at once raised to the platform of liberation, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 14.26, Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati tyaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord transcends the modes of material nature and is immediately elevated to the spiritual platform. A Krishna conscious person begins from the transcendental stage, and he is constantly in the consciousness, in that consciousness. Therefore, there is no falling down, and ultimately he enters into the abode of the Lord without delay. The practice of reduced eating is automatically done when one eats only Krishna prasadam, or food which is offered first to the Lord. Reducing the eating process is very helpful in the matter of sense control. And without sense control, there is no possibility of getting out of the material entanglement. Once more, the verse. Still others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance practice by offering the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Others, curtailing the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Can you hear me on the back? Great, okay. I don't see you, but if you can hear me, then everything is fine. Okay, so let's just say something first for Bhagavad Gita as a general, for those who are here for first time. Bhagavad Gita is very ancient book, and it's not just a book actually, it's a guide for living our lives. So it's a very practical book. We can learn so many practical things from Bhagavad Gita. For example, how to control ourselves, how to get free from lust, greed and anger, how to make friends and how not to lose friends, how to escape from existential crisis, Arjuna, the almighty warrior described on the pages of this book, he had existential crisis. So by the end of Bhagavad Gita, he went over it. So Bhagavad Gita is very, very practical book. And many spiritual processes are described in Bhagavad Gita so that one can choose a spiritual process to make a spiritual advancement. Bhagavad Gita is explaining us that the goal of human life is not just eating, sleeping, working, and basically maintaining the basic needs of the existence. The real goal of life is to make a spiritual advancement. So that's why Bhagavad Gita is putting lots of stress on this point, how to elevate our consciousness by following a certain spiritual practice. There are different spiritual practices, for example, karma yoga. Karma yoga means you are just a person from the world, we can say, and you have your job and you work and you get your payment, but then you have to do something spiritual with your money. Either give them for some spiritual cause, or you can use them yourself for some spiritual cause. In this way, the whole fruit of your labor becomes spiritualized. So this is one kind of spiritual practice, karma yoga. It's called the yoga of work. Then another spiritual practice is jnana yoga. One should develop a spiritual knowledge. What is the idea of spiritual knowledge? Well, if we develop spiritual knowledge, we won't be so much attached to the material existence, material world. If we think that, okay, we are part of this material world, material existence, and we have this tendency to accumulate, yes? Do we like to accumulate? No. Come on. In New York, nobody is accumulating. Where did you get this idea from? So, when we think we are matter, and then we want to accumulate different material things. Why? Because we think this is the goal of life. So I'm going to work. I'm going to work for money, for houses, for cars, for fame, for influence, all these material things. This is the goal of our existence. Now if one develops knowledge, transcendental knowledge, spiritual knowledge, then he can become very easily free from this. Now we will focus a little bit on this moment. This chapter is called the transcendental knowledge, spiritual knowledge. So the idea is how we can develop spiritual knowledge, spiritual consciousness. In the beginning of this chapter, actually, Krishna is explaining that one should get the real spiritual knowledge from a real spiritual person. This is the proper way of receiving spiritual knowledge. It's called disciplic succession, or getting the knowledge from someone who will give you the knowledge without interpretation, without changing it, without changing it, and he will also be example how to follow this knowledge. So he will speak the knowledge, he will explain the knowledge, and he himself, his life will be example of this same transcendental knowledge, spiritual knowledge. In other words, there will be no difference between what he is talking and what he is doing in life. This is called achar in Sanskrit. And someone who can do this, it's generally known as acharya. Someone who can teach something and show it with his personal example. So if we get this spiritual knowledge, by the way, in the beginning of the chapter, Lord Krishna, the Supreme Authority, he is describing what is the essence, the most important of this spiritual transcendental knowledge. Namely, he is describing the nature of the soul, he is describing the nature of God, he is describing the connection between these two. the living entity and the Supreme. And after doing this, he is explaining something very interesting. He is saying, if someone acquires this spiritual transcendental knowledge and he is acting according to this knowledge, I think this is verse maybe 18 from this chapter, for those who have the book. Let me just see. Text 17. So Krishna is saying that if someone really possesses transcendental knowledge and he is acting, actually he is not acting. Someone may be very active materially, but if he possesses transcendental spiritual knowledge and he perceives the world through this spiritual knowledge, actually he is not acting. What does that mean? I mean, if you are active, you are active, and if you are inactive, you are inactive, yes? For example, now, Bhakta Phil, he is inactive, isn't it? And someone who is running out on the street up and down, he is active, isn't it? So, what do you mean? Someone who is active is inactive, and someone who is inactive is active? It's getting too complicated. Very simple. If someone has a spiritual knowledge and he is working with this spiritual knowledge, with detachment, actually there will be no any results from his work. So it is just like he is inactive, although externally he is doing something. But someone may be staying in one place, but still he'll get some karma. Why? Because he is existing. For example, our Bhakta Phil, he is breathing still, I hope. He's smiling, okay, that means he's breathing. He's breathing, so if he is breathing, that means something is going on. At least he is unwillingly, he is killing maybe 1 billion microbes every moment with his breathing. And avoidably this brings some karma, isn't it? Every our action has some consequence, has some karma, some result. So apparently someone may be inactive externally, but actually again he is getting some karma, because this is how the world is working. So anyway, that's a very important point. If we acquire this spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge, although we may be just like a Monday people from the world, and we can be just working from morning till evening, there will be no karma, there will be no result, no negative result. Now, in the previous 6-7 verses, Krishna started interesting topic in this chapter. So Krishna is explaining, okay, now I will explain how to get this transcendental knowledge. Krishna explained what is this transcendental knowledge, then he explained more or less what will be the result, and now he is going to explain how to get it. What is the way to get this transcendental knowledge? And Krishna begins to describe different, we could say, spiritual practices or austerities, sacrifices. What is the idea of austerity or sacrifice? Can someone tell me? When you hear the words like austerity or sacrifice, with what?
Some kind of result, like the austerity of studying to get grades or working hard for promotion. It's like you're suffering temporarily in the present for some kind of long-term benefit.
Okay. So you perform some activity, it may not be very pleasant, but you're doing it because you know this will bring you some good result after that. Yes, that's the idea of austerity or sacrifice. You are sacrificing something so that you can get something else, which is even better. So yeah, Krishna starts describing all kinds of activities, spiritual activities that people they can do, and in this way get this spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge, which apparently is the greatest spiritual wealth, the greatest spiritual gift. For example, Krishna is saying, some people, they achieve this transcendental knowledge by studying. Studying sometimes is very pleasant, sometimes is not so pleasant. And by doing through this process, you can get spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge. Others, Krishna is saying, like the brahmacharis, the monks, they sacrifice their hearing process by hearing constantly spiritual sound. So this is, we are getting some news what actually brahmachari life is all about. The brahmacharis, they should really be always submerged in transcendental sound, spiritual sound. And this will purify their consciousness and they will be able to get spiritual realizations. So from morning till evening, a brahmachari, he should, one way or the other, always listening spiritual, transcendental vibration. And then Krishna is saying, but others, the family people, who are apparently engaged in worldly affairs, they are advancing the opposite way. Like the brahmacharis, they keep away from the sense objects. So they are completely immersed in this spiritual vibration and they try not to pay attention to the external objects of sense gratification. Now Krishna is saying the family people, for them is the opposite. Actually they should have objects, sense objects, and they have to use them, but not for themselves, but for the sake of spiritual advancement, for spiritual cause, for spiritual purpose. Do you understand what I'm trying to say or not exactly? Okay, let's give you an example so that it becomes more clear. For example, you are a family person, and family people generally, they will have facilities, yes? They'll have a nice house, they'll have a car, they'll have, let's say, a nice kitchen, they can cook nice preparations. So now, they don't have to renounce all these things. Or rather, they should use them for the sake of others, not for personal sense gratification. This is their sacrifice. They have something, but actually they are sacrificing it for others. And this creates spiritual advancement for them. So they make this spiritual development and they get spiritual knowledge. Like, for example, you invite guests and you sacrifice your time for these guests. You will cook for them, you serve for them, you can benefit them spiritually, you can give them some, you can read Bhagavad Gita together, you can discuss spiritual topics, and in this way, everything that they have, their house, their car, their kitchen, everything is used for a spiritual purpose. So this is their sacrifice, Krishna is saying. Now others, the mystic yogis, their sacrifice is different. What are they doing? Well, they are different mystics and they have different practices, spiritual practices, but more or less, some of them, they try to prolong their life, to make their life practically very, very, very long. And how are they doing this? Well, in today's verse we have some description. If you manage to get this practice of somehow neutralizing the incoming breath in the body and outgoing breath, then you achieve certain situation which sometimes they call it something like a samadhi, spiritual trance, in which practically the yogi stops breathing. And when he stops breathing, his heart starts beating works very slow, beating very slow. And in this way, because yogis, they are saying your lifespan, it's depends, like the moment you are born, already is fixed how many breaths you have this lifetime. And now you can use them the way how you like, but the yogis, they are coming from this concept and they are saying, okay, so if I breathe less, I will live more. And this is what they are doing. By following these practices, basically they reduce their breathing, and in this way they can live for a long time. They are saying, I have not seen with my own eyes, but they are saying that in the Himalayas there are yogis who are 300, 400, 500 years old. And it may look a little bit mystical, maybe a little bit strange even. But like, for example, we as devotees, for us it's not strange because we have great teachers in our disciplic succession that they were also living very long. For example, Advaita Charity said that he was living 125 years. And for Bhuva Mangala Thakur, some places it is said that he lived for 700 years. How? Don't ask me, I don't know, but this is what they're saying. So apparently it's possible to live a long life. Sometimes they say these stories about these yogis in the Himalayas that they were living so long that 2 or 3 times they changed their teeth. Because if you live long enough, they say, around 100 years you start changing your teeth. So they went through this 2-3 times. Maybe we have to go and see one day. Seeing is believing, some people say. So maybe we can see. But the point is that anyway, through this practice they are able to live for a very, very, very long time. Now, from one spiritual perspective, one can say, well, this is valuable because you have more time, so you can use more time for spiritual advancement. And yes, from one point, maybe yes. But then if you don't really use wisely your time, what's the use of this time? You may have lots of time, but if you're not using it wisely, so what? Like sometimes Srila Prabhupada is giving the example of the trees. We have trees which are living like few hundred years, few thousand years sometimes. And so what? What is the benefit of such a life? So someone may achieve very long life, but what is the use if he is not using it properly? And then other place Srila Prabhupada is giving the example of great personalities who they were like great spiritual reformers. They changed the whole history of the world, like people like Jesus Christ. How many years he was living? Who knows?
It was like 33 or something.
33, correct. Or Shankaracharya, how many years he was living? Do you know? Prabhu, you know?
Actually, I do not know how many years Shankaracharya lived.
37 or 30?
I'm not exactly sure, but I remember
30s, yeah.
37, 38, 39, something like that also.
32?
32.
Even less? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And how many years Lord Chaitanya lived?
That's interesting.
48. So, from one perspective, one can say, well, I mean, these were spiritual people. They had to live like hundreds of years, this and that. Why so little? What was the problem? Even our Srila Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, from some perspective, someone may say, well, he did not live for a very long time. So, again, the point is not just how much you are living, but what you are doing with your time. We prefer to have more substantial life than just a long life. This is one important point from spiritual perspective. And then Srila Prabhupada is saying something very important in his purport. He's saying that yogis, they are doing all these practices so that they can control their senses, because the senses, they create lots of problems. Senses in the mind, generally they create all kinds of problems. Conflicts, wars, depression, desire for suicide, all these things are coming actually from the mind. And someone who can control the mind, he can not become a reason for all these things to happen. So the yogis, they try to control their senses and their mind. Actually, it is said like the mind is sometimes called the main of all the senses, because all the information from the senses goes into the mind, and then the mind decides what we are going to do on the basis of this information. He likes some things, he doesn't like other things, and then he wants to do certain things and he doesn't want to do other things. Srila Prabhupada is saying in the case of the bhakti yogis, the situation is a little bit different. They control their senses automatically by engaging them in spiritual activities. Now, many of the spiritual practices, people, they manage to get some control or some restraint of their senses. But one question that we can ask is for how long this will go on. What do you think? Okay, let's give an example. Someone is on a diet, yes? And he wants to lose some kilos, for example. For example, 10 kilos. And he's working very, very hard, like very austere diet. He doesn't eat his or her favorite foods and making lots of exercises. Now when the result is achieved, generally what's going on after that? What's happening? Okay, now is the time. Austerity over, life, Haribo. And then again the same thing. And then after maybe 1 year, oh no, I lost everything. Okay, let's do it again. So this is what's going on in the material world. We enjoy the material objects, and then at some point we become disappointed, and then we say, no, now I have to renounce them. And then we go for some whatever, strict diet, or we don't do something that actually we like to do for some amount of time, and then again we say, okay, now let me go back to the sense gratification. And then we are constantly changing these two. And then actually, if we see, gradually with the time, the things are getting worse and worse and worse. I will share with you an interesting story. I hope you like stories. When I was small means maybe 14 or 15, and me and my family, we went for a holiday on the sea, Black Sea, and then my father took with us one of his good schoolmates. They were good friends, and at that point he was married, he had a son, but then he got divorced, and he was coming very often actually to our home. So my father said, just come with us. He came with us, and then because generally in the evenings we were walking, small like town, walking, full with tourists. And then at some point he started to speak to me about some spiritual stuff. Like for example, he was telling me, so you look in the world and you see certain things. For example, you see what your whatever, like something that you like. But actually this is not what you are seeing. What you are seeing, this is only a combination of atoms. And that was very shocking for me, because I never saw the world from this perspective. I mean, for me, the world is, you have an object, and this object is meant for something, and generally some kind of your sense gratification, isn't it? This is how we are perceiving the world. Now that was like mind-blowing information for me. And then he started telling me that actually everything which is around us is nothing but earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And that was again like, like just someone started beating me with a hammer on the head. I was feeling like that. What is this? And then this really impressed me a lot. I was thinking for a long time after this on these topics. So anyway, life went on. Maybe I was seeing this friend of my father maybe once every 1 year, 2 years. So after a few years I met the devotees, I got Bhagavad Gita, I started reading Bhagavad Gita, and then I understood, that's it, this is the greatest spiritual treasure, there is nothing higher than this. And then immediately I wanted to share with him, because I considered this a person who really is into spirituality. And then we spoke, I was explaining the philosophy, whatever I knew at that time, and he was telling me some of his realizations. And then he even bought one Bhagavad Gita. He said, okay, get one copy for me also, I want to have this book, this is a very precious book. But then when we were discussing like more in depth the conclusions of Bhagavad Gita, he said, yes, I understand this, but I don't agree with the conclusion. I don't agree that the absolute truth is a personality. For me, absolute reality is just some energy, some power, some strength, that's it. And then we were talking again and again. I was trying to explain logically from different perspectives, but he was saying, okay, I understand your point, but still, that's it for me. And then he said, maybe one day I'll come to this conclusion, but not now. I have my own practice. And then I tried to explain this simple fact that I read on the pages of Bhagavad Gita, and I told him, you have a good spiritual practice, but your spiritual practice has a problem. What is that? Because he was sharing with me his experience from before that. He was becoming very serious spiritually, very rigid for some days, let's say. He'll make a fast for 27 days, not eating, drinking little water maybe every second day or something like that. And because of these rigid experiences, he had some spiritual realizations. Basically, the way how he was explaining it, something like he kind of managed to realize to some extent that, okay, he's not the body, he's spirit. And his consciousness was staying for some amount of time on this level, just one spiritual level of existence. But after these 27 days, he was coming back to the reality. And not just coming back to the sattvic reality, but even more down. For example, being bored from his life and not able to experience always this high spiritual level, he was again going to wine and eating meat again sometimes. And I remember sometimes he was coming in my home to visit my father, and he was bringing his wine with him, and he was saying to my father, okay, let's sit and just talk about life and drink something. And I was trying, because he's much older than me, but I was trying in a friendly, gentle way to tell him, why do you need this if you are spiritually advanced? Spiritually advanced people, they don't need wine to be happy, or meat. And he was always telling me the same thing. He was telling me, I know that, you see, one day I'll come again to the level that I was before. And again he was speaking in the same way. And again I was trying to convince him that, you see, you have some spiritual practice, but you have a problem. Your spiritual practice is not steady. You're doing it for 1 month, then again you go to the material life completely. Then again you do your spiritual practice, then again material life. But he was so attached to it, he didn't want to let it go. He knew what is the alternative, but he didn't want it. And yeah, so anyway, he continued his spiritual path at some point. I hope he's doing well now, wherever he is. But the point is that there is some great advantage of the practice of Bhakti Yoga, that we don't just restrain our senses. Rather, we try positively to engage our senses in a spiritual positive engagement, and when they are engaged in this, automatically they will not be engaged in anything bad. This is the simple logic of Bhakti Yoga, of Krishna consciousness. So in other words, let's say if you are with a good friends, spiritual friends, and you have a good talk, you have a good time, and you eat nice, healthy, spiritual food, and you have a great time, you won't go for the lower things. It's so simple. So preoccupy yourself so much with spiritual activities that you don't have time for any bad habits. This is the simple idea of Krishna consciousness. And this is what Srila Prabhupada is explaining in this purport. Basically, try to adjust your lifestyle in such a way that you are associating with nice people, you are eating nice food, you are doing your positive spiritual practice, and in this way you are getting rid of everything bad in your life. Now someone may say it's not so easy to do it than just to say it. Well, there is nothing easy in the world. I mean, what is easy? To make money? Is it easy to make money? You have to go and work hard. Is it easy to take care for kids? No. Is it easy to become influential personality? Have many whatever likes and shares and it's not easy. You have to work hard. For everything you have to work hard. So anyway we are going to work hard if we want to be successful people, then let's be successful people for the best thing, for the spiritual thing, for the spiritual advancement. And maybe as a conclusion, I will say one more thing. As we said, here Krishna is describing different spiritual processes, and through them we can elevate our consciousness and we can get spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge. So now, in order to get this transcendental spiritual knowledge, we have to choose our sacrifice. We should have a sacrifice. Little later, after a few verses, Krishna will make this point that without sacrificing something, you cannot achieve nothing good, neither in this world, neither on the next. So we have to sacrifice something for the benefit of spiritual advancement. Now we have to decide what will be our spiritual path. Are we going to fast 27 days? Are we going to forget about sleeping? Are we going to, I don't know, stay on one leg for whatever, 2 years and 5 months? Some kind of sacrifice we should have. And of course, our Srila Prabhupada often is saying that our process is very easy and very simple, because devotee's lifestyle, the Hare Krishna lifestyle, basically is what? You have to chant Hare Krishna. Is it difficult to chant Hare Krishna? No. Anyway, we are going to chant something, but if we chant Hare Krishna, we will make spiritual advancement. You have to read nice books. It's nice to read nice books, philosophical books, to learn interesting things, read nice stories. And these are not just some ordinary stories. This is the universal histories. Stories from all over the universe, all different planets, all different living entities. It's amazing stories, like phew. And then you have to get together with nice people, like-minded people, not aggressive people, not envious people, not angry people, and just have a nice talk with them, chat, share spiritual realizations while you are eating a very tasty vegetarian food. Is it bad? No, there is nothing difficult following this process. And the benefit is eternal. And there are other spiritual processes which are not so easy. Like, for example, if we read the traditional yoga texts, the sutras of Patanjali, well, there it is described that if you are a serious practitioner of yoga, first thing you have to do is you have to leave the world. You have to leave the world. You have to leave the city. You have to go somewhere in the nature, in the forest, in the mountains, when there are no other people. You have to be alone. This is like the beginning of the Ashtanga yoga practice. Then you have to follow complete brahmacharya, it is said in this text. And then for a very long time you have to live very austere lifestyle. Basically, traditional yogis, they were eating only whatever they can find in the mountains, in the forest. Some fruits, some roots, drink little spring water, and That's it. Be happy, be satisfied. And if you cannot do it, well, that's your problem. Sometimes there are stories, the yogis purposefully, they were closing some of their friends in a cave. They put him in the cave and they completely closed very tightly the entry of the cave with the stones and other things. Why? Because inside he has only certain amount of air. And now he has only that much time to learn to live without breathing. Otherwise he will die. And then they were forced to learn the technique. Otherwise, adios amigo. But it's intense practice. I mean, it's intense. Like if you think about it, you go inside and you may not come back. So in comparison to this, the Bhakti Yoga lifestyle is very practical. You can just be in the world. You can be a completely like normal person, working person, family person, and you can practice. Other serious schools, spiritual schools, they don't accept family people, by the way. Srila Prabhupada is saying in one purport. Why? Because it's a distraction. So you have to free your mind from distraction. So that's why don't get married, just go somewhere. Some monastery, something like that. But Srila Prabhupada is saying the practice of that Bhakti Yoga is so potent that you can develop such a strong taste for spiritual activities of Krishna consciousness, chanting, reading Bhagavatam, tasting prasadam, that although someone can live practically in a family life, with a wife, with the kids, these things they won't disturb him at all. He'll be able to have his family life, have nice association, and still he'll make very strong spiritual advancement. So this is the unique position of Bhakti Yoga lifestyle. Okay, so if you have to remember something from this class, please remember, pick up your sacrifice. We should have a sacrifice. This is a human life. We have to choose which one. Hare Krishna, thank you very much. We have some questions or comments. Atma Nivedana Prabhu, if you like to add
Sure.
something.
Sure.
Would you like a mic or?
I don't need it.
Okay.
So Prabhu, you're saying you're on the. It seems to me on the one hand you're emphasizing that the practice that is encouraged in the books and in your class, the Bhakti Yoga, the devotional yoga with the chanting Hare Krishna and so forth, and reading these books, that it's easy. It's easier than the other stuff out there to do for both for a living and if you want to make progress spiritually. You're saying it's easy. But I'm just wondering, it also seems like you're saying, well, you have to, to succeed in anything, it seems like you have to work hard. You said, right? If you want to make money, it doesn't come easy. You want to be a social influencer, it's not handed to you on a silver platter. Like whatever you do, you got to work for it. So I guess what I'm wondering is, so if you want to make spiritual progress, let's say on this path that you're encouraging, the Bhakti Yoga, so can you take it easy? Some people they want to have a spiritual path, and they want to have it kind of easy, if when I need a break from my work, I want to take a trip to the Caribbean, go on the beach, take it easy. So can I approach the spiritual life sort of like that? I want to take it easy, everything relaxed, easygoing, and have my spiritual life while I'm relaxing. Is that something you would recommend?
Thank you for the question. Well, first let's see this point that we said that no matter where you want to achieve success, you have to put endeavors. So this is the same for the material sphere of life and for the spiritual. So endeavor should be there. That is unavoidable. But now, if you compare how much endeavor we have to put in order to achieve some material success, and for how long we will be able to keep the results from this. And if you compare the spiritual practice of Bhakti Yoga with this, well, it's more worthy from one point. Why? Because you will put some endeavors, but the result will be eternal. That's the first point. Then, yes, in the beginning we will put some endeavors, and we cannot just do it easy because, as we said, we have to control the senses and the mind, so some endeavor will be there. But still, it won't be so much endeavor as the other spiritual practices. That's the first point. And then the second point is, with the time it will become much more easy and much more natural. It will be much more easy and much more natural. Like, for example, I remember the first, when I started this practicing of Bhakti Yoga in the beginning, it was so difficult to get up early in the morning. It was so difficult for me, somehow. I don't know why. Maybe I was too much in Tamaguna. That was really big struggle to get up like 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, okay, you just do it. Get up, take shower, and then you're fine, no problem. It becomes like a habit, and now it's very easy. Now you have taste to chant Hare Krishna. Now you have taste to discuss spiritual books with others. In the beginning it may not be exactly like that. So I would rather recommend, well, in the beginning, sincere practitioner should put little bit endeavor, should push little bit harder, and then gradually with the time he'll see that it will become much more easy, much more natural.
Thank you.
Would you like to add something?
No, I'm just listening. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Something else?
Sasha?
Do you know, okay, I have first one question. What is the time?
Oh,
6:53.
yeah.
Okay. So then I'll ask you one question.
Yeah,
Let's see.
This one has a question, by the way.
Uh-huh.
The front row.
Okay.
Yeah, I was wondering, there was another talk, like spiritual versus religious. Kind of wondering with your story with your dad's friend, you know, the one who had a spiritual practice. You know, people hear a lot of rules and stuff, and at least in the States, you know, our experience with organizations can be pretty bad. I'm kind of curious for people who are like sour with organizations and organize anything, whether it's spiritual practices, religions, they don't want to do their own thing. What creates that mentality of like, oh, I can create my own practice? And how far can they get with that kind of mentality of, oh, I want to approach spirituality, but I want to do it my way, versus following the rules and regulations? I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, kind of like the story of your dad's friend. Now, what is it that makes people want to do that in the first place? Kind of do their own thing versus just taking another approach that might be presented to them by someone who's advancing it farther.
If I understand correctly, the question is, what is pushing some people basically to want to have their own way of spiritual advancement and even maybe not to be part of some like organized spiritual endeavor like some institution or something like that? Well, from my personal experience, when I was speaking with this friend of my father, he still had a strong false ego. Although he was trying kind of to present it as a spiritual, but actually it was not completely spiritual. He did not want it actually to humble so much himself that he takes the position of just going to someone and getting knowledge from him. He wanted to achieve everything himself on his own. Nobody will tell me anything. I don't need anybody. I'll just do it on my own. So there was a little bit like an ego. But I was speaking also about this with him because we are quite close, and I was trying to explain. And of course, in the beginning, he was much older and he read more books, and it was very easy for him to win over my arguments. Then gradually, with the time when I was studying more and I had more practical arguments from the books of Prabhupada, he had a very hard time to do that. And then, on one level, he was accepting that what I'm telling is right. That's why he was, at some point, he started telling me, yeah, maybe a little later, maybe I'll come and I'll join your ashram. He was saying this, but very deep in himself, he kept this false ego. He did not want to surrender. I think that like the biggest problem is this idea that we have that at the end of the day we are gods, actually. And because we are gods, we don't want to be dependent from anybody else. That's like the main root of the problem. And but then we see that practically is not working, because why he was becoming again and again addicted to all these bad habits. I mean, like, with respect to him, he's one of my gurus, but he did it all after that. Like, because we are very close and he was sharing with me some things. He started drinking, he started eating meat again. Then one time he came and he said, you know what's happening in my life? Like, I cannot believe. I just so he was living in a house which was something like a house twin. Two houses, they are stuck to each other, but they have separate courtyards. He said, I just went to my neighbors and there is a very beautiful lady living there, and I just told her, I want to get married for you. And the lady, she was shocked. And I said, well, sorry that I'm saying it, but this is the truth. I have to be honest. I'm a yogi, I have to be honest. So that was a little bit over the border. But I mean, this is the reality. If you cannot get everything that you need from the spiritual life, you will have to get it from the material life. This is how it goes. Sooner or later, you can restrain your senses for a very long period of time, but if you don't come to the platform to be able to experience joy from your spiritual practice, from your spiritual life, you will look for the same happiness, but on the material platform, sooner or later. It's just a question of time when you're going to do it. So, yeah. And about the institution, yeah, many people, they have this idea, I want to be spiritual, I want to have my spiritual practice, but I don't want to have anything to do with institution. Which, yeah, no problem. If you don't want to be part of institution, what's your problem? Just go a few times, get the books, get the knowledge, get the process, and then go home and practice the process. Who is stopping you? No problem. It's not that you have to be like, go to the organization and they just get the ropes and tie you, I don't know, for the altar, and then you cannot leave the temple or something like that. No, everybody is a free person. Just go get whatever you need for your spiritual life and go home. But one thing is very difficult. It's very, very difficult to practice spiritual life without association of other spiritual people. You can do it without institution, no problem. But without other spiritual people, very, very, very difficult. That's why it is very much recommendable that everybody should find some spiritual sangha, some spiritual association. It can be one person, but you need some spiritual association. There is a famous letter of Srila Prabhupada. He wrote to, I think, Yamuna Mataji. She was living with another lady, Srila Prabhupada disciple, somewhere, very isolated place. And she wrote to Srila Prabhupada that I don't go often to the temple and I don't have very good relationship with the devotees there, but I'm with this and this disciple of yours, and we have very good relationship, and we are reading Bhagavatam every day, and we are chanting, and we are very happy. And Srila Prabhupada wrote back a letter, and he said, yes, this is sadhu sangha. If you have even one person with which you can do all these spiritual activities, this is great success. So just go on with this. So at least 1, 2, 3 people. We should have very close people, like-minded people, friendly people, and we can share with them. We can share our problems in life so that we can stay normal people. and we can also share our spiritual realizations and make spiritual advancement.
Prabhupada said, 100 persons in one place, if they're incompatible, nobody makes spiritual advancement. But there may be 2 persons, if they're compatible, they make spiritual advancement. This was
The words from the letter. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure even this letter, I think they...
Conversation. Okay.
What was it he said?
He's
100
100 persons in
persons?
one place, but
100 persons.
100
Yes.
people, yeah. But they are incompatible, that means they'll commit offenses. They'll fight. So Prabhupada said nobody makes spiritual advancement because of Vaishnava Parada. But 2 persons, if they're compatible, they make spiritual advancement. So that is the answer.
Like quality over quantity.
Okay, thank you very much for your kind attention. So maybe we will make another 10 minutes or so kirtan. Please join us with singing Hare Krishna, and then we'll taste very nice spiritual food, prasadam.
Right.